Why does silence sometimes speak louder than any words ever could? In the scorched air of Bagram Airfield, where the smell of burnt coffee mixed with aviation fuel and the endless dust of Afghanistan, a woman sat alone. Her uniform was wrong. Too clean, too blue, Navy digital camouflage in a sea of Army green. Commander Evelyn Thorne ate her meal with the kind of precision that made people uncomfortable. Slow, deliberate, every movement controlled. Around her, hundreds of soldiers filled the dining facility with noise, with life, with the rough camaraderie of people who'd been in the dirt together. But she sat apart, not by choice, by design, because in this place, on this base, in this war, she was the outsider, and they wanted her to know it. Check out the new liaison. The voice cut through the ambient noise like a blade. Captain Rex Larson, Army, 10th Mountain Division. A man whose jaw seemed permanently locked in a smirk. He gestured with a plastic fork, playing to his audience, two lieutenants and a sergeant who laughed on cue. Pretty sure she just beamed down from the Starship Enterprise. More laughter. Wet, conspiratorial, the kind that feeds on itself. You think she knows there's dust here? Thorne didn't look up. Her fork cut through chicken with surgical precision. Her eyes stayed on her plate. This was the first rule, the only rule that mattered in moments like this. Do not engage. Do not give them what they want. A reaction is currency, and she was not in the business of making other people rich. But Larson thrived on escalation. He saw her silence not as discipline but as weakness, an invitation. "Hey, Commander," his voice pitched to carry. Tables went quiet, heads turned. The dining facility held its breath. "Welcome to the real world. We don't have a lot of paperwork to push around here, but I'm sure we can find a stapler for you to guard." He paused, smiled, delivered the punchline. "Don't want you to get bored, Princess." The word hung in the air, princess. It was lazy, uninspired but effective. It was meant to shrink her, to reduce everything she was, everything she'd earned, to a gendered caricature, a joke, something small and decorative and utterly without consequence. Thorne placed her fork and knife down, perfectly parallel. She took a slow sip of water. Her face remained a placid mask, but behind her eyes systems were activating, data collection, analysis. She noted his name tape, Larson. She noted his unit patch, 10th Mountain. She memorized the faces of the men with him, their ranks, their body language, all of it filed away, catalogued, data points, nothing more. One of the lieutenants, emboldened by her silence, decided to contribute. "Maybe she's lost, Captain. Think the fleet's parked in the Panjshir River." More laughter. Thorne picked up her utensils, finished her meal, each movement unhurried, methodical. The ambient noise slowly returned. The moment of theater passed, but the eyes remained on her. She could feel them, pity, amusement, and from a few a spark of quiet indignation. People who knew better, people who understood what they were watching, the disrespect of a superior officer in a combat zone. The kind of thing that unraveled discipline, that got people killed. When she finished, she collected her trash, stood, placed her tray on the return rack. Her path to the exit took her directly past Larson's table. He leaned back in his chair, blocking her way, forcing her to either stop or alter her course. A power play, crude but effective. "Leaving so soon, Commander." His smile was predatory. "Don't let us scare you off, we're just trying to be friendly." Thorne stopped. She did not look at his face. Her eyes fell to the subdued patch on his sleeve. Then to the table. Then to the clear path a few feet to her left. She said nothing. Her silence was a vacuum, and Larson's ego rushed to fill it. "Cat got your tongue? Or do they teach you not to talk to the ground pounders in whatever finishing school you came from?" Finally raised her head. Her gaze swept over him once. Cool, analytical, like a scanner cataloging a piece of equipment. Then she spoke. Her voice was low, clear, carried no inflection. "You are obstructing a walkway, Captain." It was not an accusation, it was a statement of fact, a simple procedural reality, and it seemed to startle him. He had expected anger, fear, a flustered retort. He got a tactical observation. For a moment his smirk faltered. He glanced at his men, then shifted his chair an inch, begrudging compliance wrapped in defiance. Thorne walked past without another word, her footsteps steady and silent on the concrete floor. She did not look back. Outside, the sunlight was blinding, the heat immediate and oppressive, but she walked through it with the same measured pace. the same control. The incident was over. The documentation had just begun. Back in her quarters, a sterile container in the transient billeting area, she opened a ruggedized laptop. She did not write an emotional journal entry. She did not vent to a friend. She created a new file, time-stamped, encrypted. She logged the date, the time, the location, dining facility 4. She listed the participants. Captain Rex Larson, 10th Mountain Division, accompanied by 2 unidentified lieutenants and 1 unidentified sergeant. She transcribed the verbal exchange, verbatim, including the derogatory term princess, the challenge to her role, the obstruction of her movement. She noted their unit insignia, the general description of his companions. She recorded her own response, or lack thereof. It was a report, clinical, detached, as if she were documenting a communications anomaly, a system malfunction. When she finished, she saved the file to a secure partition. Rule 0, document first, hit file, minimal, type, let the system work. Because escalation was a tool of the undisciplined, correction was a function of procedure. What do you do when the world sees you as decoration but you're built like a weapon? Thorne accessed the base personnel roster. A simple query, Captain Rex Larson. His file appeared, complete with service number, current assignment. He was attached to a quick reaction force, a unit that prided itself on aggression, on decisive action. His record was filled with commendations, field exercises, combat readiness. But there were also 2 minor counseling statements. Inter-service friction from a previous joint posting. A pattern. She cross-referenced the time of the dining facility incident with duty rosters. The lieutenants and sergeant were easily identified. She added their names to her report. It was now complete. Then she pulled up the base standing orders, the articles pertaining to professional conduct, customs and courtesies, the Uniform Code of Military Justice provisions against contempt toward officials, conduct unbecoming an officer. She highlighted the relevant sections, saved them as a separate file, linked it to her report. This was not revenge, it was not personal, it was about the integrity of the chain of command, an institution she believed in even when its individual components failed. She was not building a case against a man, she was documenting a systemic deviation. The system, if properly engaged, would correct itself. It always did. Her final act of preparation was personal. She opened a small locked case on her desk. Inside, nestled in foam, was a single circular patch, black, with a stylized phoenix rising from silver flames. Around the edge, in muted gray thread, were Latin words, fides in tenebris, faith in darkness. She ran a thumb over the intricate stitching. It was a reminder of her true purpose here, a purpose far beyond the comprehension of men like Captain Larson. She was not a liaison in the traditional sense. She was a ghost, a guardian of the invisible spectrum that connected every soldier, every drone, every bomb on this battlefield. She closed the case. The brief ritual was complete. She was recalibrated. 2 days later, the provocation escalated, just as her analysis of Larson's pattern had predicted. Thorne was conducting a system diagnostic at the Sensitive Compartmented Information Facility, the SCIF, a windowless bunker where the base's most classified operations were coordinated. She was deep in code, monitoring electromagnetic signatures, tracking power grid emissions from nearby villages, looking for anomalies, for patterns that didn't belong. The work was invisible, abstract. The kind of thing that made people's eyes glaze over when she tried to explain it. But it was the foundation of everything. Communications, targeting, surveillance. The entire architecture of modern warfare ran through systems she helped design, systems she maintained, systems only a handful of people in the entire Department of Defense truly understood. The door to the SCIF opened. A blast of hot air. A figure entered. Master Sergeant Dale Finch, Army Security Forces. He approached her workstation with the kind of swagger that suggested he'd been sent on a mission. Commander Thorne. His tone was formal but edged with something else, disdain. I need to see your credentials. She looked up from her screen, her expression neutral. My credentials were verified when I entered the facility, Sergeant. He smirked. Well, there's been a concern raised about your clearance level. I need to verify it again. A concern she understood immediately. This was not standard procedure. This was harassment orchestrated. Larson's next move. She could have argued, could have cited regulations, could have pulled rank. Instead, she reached into her pocket, removed her CAC card, her common access card, and handed it to him. He scanned it slowly, making a show of it. The system beeped. Green light, full clearance. Top secret, sensitive, compartmented information. He frowned, handed it back. All right, just following protocol. He turned to leave, then stopped, looked back. You know, Commander, some people think you're in over your head here, just saying. She did not respond, did not dignify it with acknowledgement. He left. The door sealed behind him with a hydraulic hiss. Thorne returned to her work, but her fingers moved across the keyboard with increased purpose. She opened a new file, logged the incident. Timestamped, location, SCIF Bagram Airfield, subject, Master Sergeant Dale Finch, nature of interaction, harassment under the guise of security protocol. She noted his unit, his supervisor, the likely connection to Captain Larson, all of it documented, all of it filed. The system was being tested, and she was recording every test. That night in the darkness of her quarters, she allowed herself a moment of something she rarely indulged. Doubt, not about her abilities, not about her mission, but about whether the system she believed in would actually work, whether the documentation, the procedure, the chain of command would be enough, or whether she was just a woman in a blue uniform, alone in a desert, shouting into the void. She thought about the men she'd trained with at the Naval Academy, the ones who'd made admiral, the ones who commanded fleets. Would they have been mocked in a dining facility? Would they have been harassed in a SCIF? She knew the answer, and it made her tired, not angry, just tired, but she also knew something else. She knew that anger was a luxury, a distraction, and she could not afford distractions, because while Larson and his friends played their games, she had work to do, real work, the kind that saved lives, the kind that won wars. So she filed the doubt away, logged it, acknowledged it, and moved on, because that's what professionals did. Have you ever noticed how the most dangerous people are often the quietest? The next day, the base hummed with routine. Convoys rolled out, helicopters clattered overhead, soldiers ran drills, and in the heart of the base, in the Joint Operations Center, Commander Evelyn Thorne sat at her workstation, silent, focused, unremarkable, except for the fact that at that exact moment she was the most important person on the entire installation. A call came in, encrypted, Priority Alpha. An operation was going sideways. A team was in the field, special operations, high-value target, and their communications had just gone dark, not because of enemy action, because of a system failure. A catastrophic malfunction in the encrypted satellite link that connected them to command. Without it, they were deaf, blind, cut off, and in hostile territory that meant dead. The Joint Operations Center erupted into controlled chaos. Officers barking orders, technical specialists scrambling, everyone trying to diagnose the problem, to fix it, to get the team back online before the situation deteriorated beyond recovery. Colonel Marcus Evans, the base operations officer, stood at the center of the storm. His face was carved from stone, his voice steady, but his eyes betrayed the truth. He was worried. "Status," he called out. A captain responded. "Still no contact, sir. We've tried every backup protocol. Nothing." Evans turned to the senior communications officer. "How long to get a tech team out there?" 4 hours minimum, sir, by then." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Thorne stood. She crossed the operations floor, her footsteps silent on the linoleum. She approached Evans, spoke quietly. "Colonel, I can fix it." He turned, looked at her. For a moment there was doubt in his eyes, not about her competence, about whether this Navy commander, this liaison, this woman who'd been mocked in a dining facility 3 days ago, could possibly solve a problem that his best technical minds could not. But he was also a pragmatist, and desperate men make pragmatic choices. "What do you need?" "Access to the satellite relay station." 5 minutes. He nodded, made the call. 2 minutes later, Thorne was in the relay station, a cramped room filled with servers, routers, and cable runs that looked like the nervous system of some vast mechanical beast. She moved with purpose, opened a diagnostic terminal. Her fingers danced across the keyboard. Lines of code scrolled past, green text on black screen. To anyone watching, it would have looked like gibberish, but to her, it was a language. Conversation with machines. She isolated the malfunction, a corrupted firmware update, a single line of bad code that had cascaded through the system like a virus. She rewrote it on the fly from memory. It took 3 minutes. She ran the diagnostic again, green lights, all systems nominal. She keyed the radio. "Colonel, try your link now." In the operations center, Evans raised a hand. The room went silent. He keyed his microphone. "Viper 6, this is Bagram TOC, how copy?" Static. Then a voice, clear, strong. "Bagram TOC Viper 6, we read you Lima Charlie, what the hell happened?" The relief in the room was palpable. Officers exhaled. Technicians slumped in their chairs. The team was back online. The mission could continue. Evans looked at Thorne, really looked at her. For the first time he saw what others had missed. Competence, mastery, the kind of expertise that didn't announce itself, that didn't need to. "Thank you, Commander," she nodded, returned to her workstation. Said nothing because the work spoke for itself. It always did. But not everyone was impressed. Later that afternoon, as Thorne walked across the base toward her quarters, she passed a group of soldiers. Larson's unit. They were standing in the shade of a cargo container, smoking, talking. As she approached, their conversation stopped. They watched her. One of the lieutenants muttered something. The others laughed. She kept walking, did not alter her pace, did not acknowledge them, but she heard it. "Guess she's useful for something." More laughter. She documented it later. In her quarters, another file, another timestamp, another entry in the growing record of systemic failure, but something had shifted. In the operations center, the word had spread. The Navy commander had saved a mission, had done something the Army's best technical minds could not. And in the unforgiving meritocracy of a forward operating base, that meant something. Respect was earned, not given, and she had just made her first payment. What happens when a system designed to protect you becomes the thing you have to fight? The harassment did not stop. It evolved, became more subtle, more insidious. Larson had learned that open confrontation was risky, so he adapted. He used his influence, his network. He made sure that Thorne was excluded from briefings she should have attended, that her requests for equipment were delayed, that her access to certain facilities required additional verification, always within regulations. Always technically justifiable, but always designed to make her job harder, to remind her that she didn't belong. It was death by 1,000 cuts, and it was effective, because institutional resistance is harder to fight than individual malice. You can't document a feeling, can't file a report about a meeting you didn't know about, can't prove that a delay was intentional rather than bureaucratic incompetence. But Thorne was patient. She continued her work, continued documenting, continued building her case, because she understood something fundamental about institutions. They move slowly, but they move. And when they finally move, they move with overwhelming force. The breaking point came during a routine security inspection. Thorne was in the SCIF, running diagnostics on the electromagnetic spectrum monitoring equipment. It was delicate work, highly classified. The kind of thing that required absolute focus. Master Sergeant Finch entered, again. "Commander, I need you to step away from the terminal, security sweep." She looked up. "Sergeant, I'm in the middle of a diagnostic. The system is live. Interrupting it could cause. Step away from the terminal, ma'am, now." His tone was not respectful. It was hostile, aggressive, a challenge. She could have complied, should have complied. But something in his tone, in the way he stood there with his hand near his sidearm, as if she were a threat, as if she were the enemy, it crossed a line. Not a line of patience, a line of safety, because in a combat zone, aggressive confrontations near sensitive systems could get people killed. She stood, slowly, deliberately. "Sergeant Finch, you are creating a security incident. I am going to need to report this." He smirked. "Report it to whoever you want, ma'am. I have my orders." "Orders from whom?" "That's above your pay grade, Commander." It was a lie, a clumsy one. Security protocols did not work that way, and they both knew it. But he was betting that she wouldn't push back, that she would be intimidated, that she would fold. He was wrong. Thorne reached for the phone on the wall, direct line to the base security office. She dialed, waited. "This is Commander Thorne, SCIF Alpha 2. I need to report a security incident." Master Sergeant Dale Finch has entered the facility and is interfering with classified operations without proper authorization. She paused, listened. Yes, I'll wait, she hung up, looked at Finch. Security is sending the duty officer. You're welcome to stay. His face went red. You just made a big mistake, Commander. No, Sergeant, you did. They stood there in silence, the tension thick enough to cut. 2 minutes later, the door opened. A lieutenant colonel entered, security forces. His expression was neutral, but his eyes were sharp. He assessed the situation instantly. Master Sergeant, step outside. Finch hesitated, then complied. The lieutenant colonel turned to Thorne. Commander, can you explain what happened? She did, calmly, factually, no emotion, just the sequence of events. When she finished, he nodded. I'll handle this. Please continue your work. He left. Thorne returned to her terminal. Her hands were steady. Her heart rate was elevated. But she was in control. She had just done something dangerous. She had forced the system to choose, and she didn't yet know which way it would fall. That night she received a message, encrypted, from Colonel Evans. Subject line, meeting requested. Time 600 tomorrow. Location, his office. No explanation. She stared at the message for a long time. This was it, the moment of truth. Either the system would work or it wouldn't. Either the documentation, the procedure, the chain of command would produce justice, or she would learn that she was truly alone. She didn't sleep much that night, not from fear, from anticipation. Because she had done everything right, had followed every rule, had documented every violation, and now she would find out if that mattered. Can truth survive in a system built on hierarchy and pride? The morning came cold and gray. Thorne dressed in her service uniform. Not her working uniform, her formal one, pressed, immaculate, every ribbon in place, every crease sharp enough to draw blood. If this was going to be a fight, she would fight in armor. She walked across the base as the sun began to rise. The mountains in the distance were silhouettes against the lightning sky. Helicopters were already in the air. The base never slept. Never stopped. The war continued regardless of personal dramas, regardless of who was right or wrong. Colonel Evans' office was in a fortified building near the operations center. She announced herself to the aide outside, was told to enter. She opened the door and stopped, because Evans was not alone. Captain Rex Larson was there, standing at attention, his face pale, his jaw tight. Master Sergeant Finch was there too, also at attention, also pale, and there were others. Lieutenant Colonel Harris from Security Forces, a JAG officer, a major from Larson's chain of command. The room was crowded, formal. This was not a conversation. This was a reckoning. Commander Thorne, Evans said, his voice flat and official. Please have a seat. She sat, her posture perfect, her expression neutral. Evans opened a folder on his desk. 3 days ago, you filed a report documenting unprofessional conduct by Captain Larson and members of his unit. Yesterday, you reported a security incident involving Master Sergeant Finch. I have reviewed both reports, along with surveillance footage, witness statements, and communications logs. He looked up. His eyes were hard. What I have found is deeply disturbing. Larson's jaw tightened. Finch looked at the floor. Captain Larson, Evans continued, turning his attention to the Army officer. You publicly mocked a superior officer. You used derogatory language. You obstructed her movement. And when she did not react, you escalated. You used your influence to have Sergeant Finch harass her, to interfere with her work, to create a hostile environment. All of this is documented. All of this is verified. Do you deny any of these facts? Larson swallowed hard. Sir, he stopped, started again. Sir, I thought she was just. I didn't know. Didn't know what, Captain? That she was a human being deserving of respect, that she was a superior officer, that her uniform, regardless of service branch, commanded the same courtesy as your own. Evans' voice was rising now, the anger carefully controlled but unmistakable. Or did you not know that actions have consequences? The room was silent. Larson stood there, a man who had been so confident days ago, now stripped of that confidence, revealed as small, petty, a bully who had picked the wrong target. Evans turned to Thorne, and for a moment she thought he was going to reprimand her too, for escalating, for not handling it quietly. But instead he did something unexpected. He stood, and he saluted her. The entire room froze. Evans held the salute, sharp, crisp, a gesture of profound respect. Slowly, Thorne stood, returned the salute. Evans dropped his hand, then gestured to the JAG officer. "Major, please brief everyone on Commander Thorne's actual assignment." The JAG officer opened a tablet, read from it. Commander Evelyn Thorne, United States Navy. Multiple advanced degrees in electrical engineering and signal processing. Distinguished graduate of the Naval War College. Former service with the Office of Naval Intelligence. Current assignment classified under Project Trident. He looked up. "Captain Larson, do you know what Project Trident is?" Larson shook his head. "No, sir. It's a direct action support element attached to Naval Special Warfare Development Group. Commander Thorne is the lead electronic warfare specialist for the Joint Special Operations Command Technology Task Force. She writes the code that allows our operators to communicate in denied environments. She designs the countermeasures that defeat enemy systems. She is, in every practical sense, one of the most valuable technical assets in this theater." The revelation landed like a bomb. Larson's face went from pale to ashen. Finch looked like he might be sick. Evans leaned forward. "The patch she wears, Captain, the one you probably dismissed as some staff insignia. Do you know what it is?" He projected an image on the screen behind him. The black circle, the silver phoenix, the Latin words, Fides in Tenebris. "This is the emblem of her unit. There are fewer than 50 people in the entire Department of Defense authorized to wear it. Each one is a master of a critical, invisible craft. She is not a guest on this base, Captain. She is one of its most vital guardians." The room was deathly quiet. "You didn't just insult an officer," Evans continued. "You insulted a national asset, and you used your position to create a hostile work environment for someone whose work saves lives every single day, including, quite possibly, your own." He stood. "Formal punishment will be decided by your commanding officer. But I will be making a strong recommendation for non-judicial punishment, loss of pay, letter of reprimand in your file. Your career as a combat leader is likely over, Captain. You have demonstrated a catastrophic failure in judgment." He looked at Finch. "Master Sergeant, you will face similar consequences. You are dismissed." They filed out. Broken, humiliated, Thorne remained seated. Evans sat back down. For a moment, neither spoke. Then he said quietly, "You could have burned them on day one. You had every right. You chose not to. Escalation serves the ego, Colonel. Procedure serves the institution." He nodded. Spoken like someone who actually understands what it means to serve. Do we ever truly understand the weight someone else carries until it's revealed? The next day, something remarkable happened. Thorne was walking from her quarters to the SCIF, her usual route, her usual pace, but as she approached, she saw something that made her pause. Captain Larson's entire platoon, formed up in 2 ranks, creating a corridor. They were in full-duty uniforms, their bearing immaculate. As she approached, a sergeant called them to attention. Every single soldier snapped to. Sharp. Precise. Then Larson stepped forward. His face was pale, but his expression was resolute. He raised his hand in a salute, his arm trembling slightly. "Ma'am," he said, his voice clear and steady, "on behalf of my men and myself, I offer our deepest and most sincere apology. There is no excuse for our conduct. We failed to uphold the standards of our service and the respect due your rank and position. It will not happen again." Thorne did not return the salute immediately. She looked at him, her gaze as analytical as ever, but perhaps with a flicker of something else. Recognition. She was assessing the sincerity, the depth of the lesson learned. After a long moment, she returned the salute, crisp, economical. "Your apology is acknowledged, Captain. See that the lesson is retained." She dropped her salute. He dropped his. Then he reached up, removed the 10th Mountain Division patch from his sleeve, held it out to her. A patch exchange. The ultimate sign of respect between warriors, an apology and a promise offered in a single silent gesture. She looked at the patch in his hand, then back at his face. She gave a small, single nod, but she did not take the patch. The apology had been made. The lesson learned. Taking a trophy was unnecessary. She walked through the corridor of soldiers, each one holding their salute until she had passed. It was silent, powerful, a testament to her restored authority. The first salutes offered upward by those who had once mocked. Over the following days, the culture on the base shifted, palpably, visibly. The quiet Navy commander was no longer an object of curiosity or derision. She was a known quantity, a figure of respect. The operators in the Joint Operations Center would nod to her as she passed. The security forces personnel at the SCIF gate now greeted her with the kind of crispness reserved for visiting generals. The swaggering confidence of Larson's unit had been replaced by a more sober, professional humility. The system had been shocked, and it had recalibrated. Thorne sat in the quiet, cool darkness of the operations center long after most staff had departed. The only light came from the soft blue glow of the holographic map and the green text scrolling on her monitor. Colonel Evans walked in, holding 2 cups of coffee. He placed one on the desk beside her without a word. "Quiet night," he said. More a statement than a question. "The spectrum is clear, Colonel," she replied, not taking her eyes from the screen. "I received confirmation of Larson's non-judicial punishment this morning," Evans said. "He requested to stay with his unit through their deployment, even in a diminished capacity. He wants to prove he's learned something." Thorne typed a final line of code, ran a diagnostic. The system returned green, nominal status. "People can learn," she said quietly. "Sometimes they just require a clear demonstration." Evans took a sip of his coffee. "You handled that perfectly, Commander, from start to finish. You had every right to burn him to the ground on day 1. You chose not to." "Escalation serves the ego," Thorne stated, finally turning to look at him. "Procedure serves the institution. The goal wasn't punishment." "What was the goal?" Evans asked. She turned back to her monitor. A new mission folder was beginning to populate, its contents classified above his level. A new fire was rising, demanding her attention. Her work was not about the past. It was always about the next threat, emerging from the darkness. "Correction," she said simply. "The system was broken. Now it works." Evans nodded, stood to leave, then paused. "For what it's worth, Commander, you're one of the finest officers I've ever served with, regardless of service branch." She didn't respond immediately, just continued working. But after a moment she said softly, "Thank you, Colonel, that means something." He left, and she remained, alone in the darkness, doing the work that no one saw, that no one understood, the work that saved lives, that won wars, the invisible architecture that held everything together. She thought about Larson, about his apology, about the salute, about whether he truly understood what he'd learned. She hoped he did, not for her sake, for his, because the military needed good leaders, needed people who could learn from their mistakes, who could grow, who could be better. But more than that, she thought about the other women who would come after her, the ones who would wear uniforms that didn't match, who would sit alone in dining facilities, who would be mocked, dismissed, underestimated, and she hoped that her documentation, her patience, her faith in the system would make their path a little easier, that the correction she had forced would ripple outward, would set a precedent, would protect someone else. Because that was the real work, not the operations, not the missions, not the code. The real work was making the system better, one documented incident at a time, one procedural correction at a time, one quiet victory at a time. Outside, the base hummed with activity. Convoys rolled out, helicopters lifted off, soldiers prepared for missions. The war continued. And in the darkness of the operations center, Commander Evelyn Thorne continued her work, silent, focused, unremarkable except for the fact that she was the most important person no one knew about, the guardian in the shadows, the phoenix rising from darkness, the woman who had been called princess, who had been mocked, dismissed, underestimated, and who had responded not with anger, not with escalation, but with something far more powerful, dignity, procedure, and an unshakable faith that the truth, when properly documented, would always find its way to light. Sometimes strength doesn't announce itself. Sometimes it doesn't need to argue or defend or prove. Sometimes it simply endures. Sometimes it documents. Sometimes it waits for the system to correct itself. And when that system finally moves, it moves with the full weight of institutional authority. It moves with clarity, with purpose, with justice. But most importantly, sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.